All right, you know Nginx, and now you've inherited an Apache server. This is the bridge. Over the next 12 minutes, we're mapping what you already know onto Apache through 4 mental swaps: the process model, the config tree, the virtual host, and the one that always trips people up, Taccess. Not deep Apache mastery, just enough to make the next 11 lessons land. Before we start, let's be honest about scope. Apache is 30 years old. You're not learning it in 12 minutes, and that's not the goal. What's in scope? The 4 mental swaps, and the translation reflex of looking at Apache and seeing the Nginx equivalent. What's out? npm tuning, the full mod rewrite regex grammar, installation, systemd. If you want depth, that's Apache Mastery, a separate series. This lesson is the bridge, enough to read the next 11. So here's the whole mental map on one slide. 3 axes, Nginx on the left, Apache on the right. Process model. Both run a master with workers, but Apache lets you pick the model via the npm, pre-fork, worker, or event. Config layout. Nearly identical, except Apache splits ports out and adds a mods-enabled directory. Requests. Your server block becomes a virtual host, location becomes directory, and yes, htaccess shows up out of nowhere. We'll get to that surprise. Read across to translate, read down to see the worldview. Let's start with the first swap, the process model. Run ps-aw against either server and you'll see the same shape. One root-owned master, a handful of www data workers. The catch is that Apache's worker behavior isn't fixed. It's chosen by the npm module loaded at build time. Run Apache 2ctl, v, and grep for npm to see which one you've got. If it says event, congratulations. That's the Nginx equivalent, async-ish, and the default since 2.4. Worker is an older process plus thread hybrid, and pre-fork is the classic one process per request model you only really see today when something's clinging to mod PHP. Swap number 2, the config tree. If you cd into ets-cars Apache2, you'll feel right at home. Apache2.conf is your nginx.conf, and sites available with sites-enabled works exactly the same symlink dance you already know. 2 real differences worth flagging. Listen directives live in their own ports.conf instead of the main file, and modules are explicit. Nothing loads until you symlink it into mods enabled, which is what a2inmod and a2dismod are doing under the hood. And that brings us to swap number 3, which is honestly the single most valuable translation in this entire lesson. An Apache virtual host is just an Nginx server block. Same job. Pick a site based on the host header. Same contents. TLS, document root, per path rules. Look at the 2 columns side by side and you'll see it's almost mechanical. Server name becomes server name. Root becomes document root. SL certificate becomes SSL certificate file. And your location with proxy.pass becomes a directory block plus a proxy pass line. That 1-to-1 mapping holds for about 80% of directives. Lesson 2 fills in the full table. Now for swap number 4, and this one has no Nginx equivalent, which is exactly why it trips people up. Apache lets any directory contain a file called .htaccess, and Apache rereads that file on every single request to that folder, applying whatever rewrites, auth rules, or headers it finds. Why? Shared hosting heritage. Back when one Apache served hundreds of users who couldn't touch the main config, htaccess was their escape hatch. Nginx, born in 2004, deliberately said no. Centralized config is faster and more predictable, and it assumes you actually own the server. So when you see .htaccess in an Apache project, recognize it for what it is. Distributed config you'll need to fold back into your central Nginx file. Step back from the 4 swaps for a moment and notice what's really going on. Apache shipped in 1995 for an internet of shared hosts and untrusted tenants, where configurability was the product. Nginx shipped in 2004 for an internet of high concurrency edge serving, where predictable performance was the product. Neither is wrong. They just optimized different constraints. So migrating isn't upgrading. It's trading flexibility for speed and central control. Hold that frame, and the configs you'll read in the next 11 lessons stop feeling weird and start feeling deliberate. With that frame in place, here's the payoff. 7 mappings that cover roughly 80% of any Apache config you'll meet. Drill the reflex left to right. Server block becomes VirtualHost. Server name becomes server name. Location becomes directory. Proxy pass becomes proxy pass, and so on. You don't need to understand Apache deeply yet. You just need this lookup burned into muscle memory so the next 11 lessons read like English. Screenshot it, print it, tape it to your monitor. Whatever works. Now you drill it. 3 exercises, 30 minutes total. First, read a real Apache VirtualHost code and translate each directive to Nginx in your head. Pattern recognition before vocabulary. Second, predict how Apache routes a request through VirtualHost, directory, and .htaccess, then verify with Apache.tl. The mismatches are where you learn fastest. Third, go the other direction. Take an Nginx block and write the Apache equivalent by hand. Reading is recognition. Writing is proof the reflex is real. Before you start drilling, here are the 5 traps that bite Nginx engineers first. Directory is file system, location is URL. Mix them up and nothing routes right. Apache 2.4 denies by default, so every directory needs require all granted, or you get a 403. On Debian, use A2Nsite. Never edit apache2.conf. Reload preserves workers like Nginx, but npm and module changes need a full restart. And .htaccess silently does nothing unless allow override is set in the parent directory. Memorize the signatures, you'll see all 5 in the wild. That's lesson 1. You've got the 4 swaps: process model, config tree, VirtualHost equals server block, and the .htaccess gotcha. Enough to read an Apache config without flinching. Next up, lesson 2, the full translation table. 30 directives, both directions, worked end to end. We move you from I can read it to I can write it. See you there.